City. Welcome to Grand Prix Oklahoma City. I'm Ben Seck. This is Jake Van Loonen. We're playing Modern, and we have the undefeated players on screen right now. Zach Elsik, the father of Lantern Control, playing against Julian John, playing Mono Green Tron.
Zach Elsik defending this venue right now. Won the last Grand Prix here. Playing the same deck.
Has he made many changes, kind of like in recent months, or even since he started playing it?
There have been some innovations to the deck, and they've oscillated quite a bit to the extent where I'm not really sure where it really was the last GP. The deck, though, the core of the deck is very much the same. Like it's very hard to change more than, it's very hard to change more than a couple main deck cards, and even changing sideboard slots can be really difficult with the deck. Although I have seen quite a few Hazarets this weekend in the sideboard. It seems like Zach's post sideboard plan sometimes involves Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas this weekend, and even Search for Azcanta.
Okay, so Zach opened with an Ancient Stirrings, finding a Pithing Needle, and he's just casting that right now. Julian John started off with an Urza's Tower. So we'll find out exactly what that needle was naming.
Yeah, probably either Karn or Oblivion Stone. I would assume Karn in the dark because it's unlikely that his opponent will be playing more than one or two Oblivion Stones in the main.
Yeah, I think the Pithing Needle main deck is a little bit better today because, one, Zach probably had a look at all his opponents overnight, what deck they were playing, so he had a good idea what Julian John was playing going in. So
yeah, it's an interesting card where it actually gets better as the tournament progresses, as opposed to getting worse. Like when you put Miser's cards in your deck, when people know about them, they get worse.
Well, they're only good if you're 9-0. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
So Julian follows up with an Urza's Mine, and Zach goes to his turn 3, casting another Ancient Stirrings, finding a Lantern of Insight, and it looks like he's just going to put that straight into play. We're going to see the top card of each player's deck. The third Ancient Stirrings revealed on Zach's deck, and another Mine for Julian. Okay, so Zach doesn't quite have the full combo yet, and it doesn't seem that he has something to mill or control the top of Julian's deck yet, because he probably would have played it because they usually cost 1.
That Pithing Needle doing quite a bit of work here, though.
Yeah, so Karn Liberated named on the Pithing Needle.
Zach's going to look for ways to control the top of Julian's library.
Yeah, so either using the Pixis of Pandemonium or the Codex Shredder.
Yeah, even Ghoul Caller's Bell, I believe.
There's a Codex Shredder just there too now, so he's definitely going to get it within one more turn. Zach also plays a Academy Ruins. Now that's Julian's third Mine. I appreciate that he's only using one version of the art for each one. It makes it easy for us.
That does make it much easier.
So it looks like he's getting kind of caught off Tron a little bit because it looks like he has 2 mines, one of them in his hand, and 2 towers, but no Urza's power plant. Okay, Zach plays Lantern. Codex Shredder.
Yeah, now something that's interesting, though, is that because of that Chromatic Star, Julian can respond to the Codex Shredder attempting to take a key card off the top of his library by sacrificing that star and making sure that card does, in fact, go to his hand. So Zach's going to need to find another way to control the top of Julian's library if he wants to truly prevent him from drawing something that could take the game over.
So Zach kind of has a soft lock right now, so he can essentially deny one card off the top, but as you said, the star allows him to kind of escape that one time. Do you think? He's actually targeting it, which is a kind of interesting play because it does replace itself.
Yeah. And there happens to be a sphere on the top of Julian's library, too. Which,
Another one, too.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interestingly enough, sphere, you can't respond
Oh, right.
the draw step because the draw is actually part of the same ability. Whereas star, it says when the star goes to the graveyard, you draw a card. With sphere, it says, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, draw a card. And, so, when your opponent taps a land, you can't say in response.
So Zach has basically used his second Lantern Insight to lock out a sphere on top of Julian's deck. So now Zach has, what a term of soft lock. Like, what's the likelihood that Julian's able to get out of this now? I mean,
Well, he has good draw step here. This is precisely what Julian needed. Julian needed this specific draw step to go his way.
Mm-hmm.
Zach has the tools to prevent, Julian from having, one good draw step. But if he gets multiple cards in a row, then things can get really, really difficult. Or if Julian can hit multiple cards in a row.
So Julian plays his, aforementioned Walking Ballista, so we saw that on top of his deck.
Yeah, and that was his window of opportunity to draw something. And he did it. So
Zach could Codex Shred the Sylvan Scrying off top of Julian's deck because he's only one type off Tron. Do you think it's worth doing for him?
it probably is because of the presence of Walking Ballista. And the thing about Walking Ballista, especially in this matchup, is that, Zach's deck leans very hard on a card like Ensnaring Bridge to prevent the opponent from being able to pressure him. And yeah, he doesn't have one right now, but I imagine he's looking to have one in the not-too-distant future. And if Julian gets Tron, then that Walking Ballista is going to kill Zach so fast.
Well, it looks like Zach's not going to be able to stop Julian from going to Tron because he drew a expedition map which can be used to search for, and almost definitely going to search for, an Urza's power plant.
Yeah, and that's 11 mana right there, even after spending 3 of his lands to cast and activate the map. So that's going to be 2 activations of that Walking Ballista, and that can put Zach down to 12 and have 5 counters on the Walking Ballista. So
Yeah,
he's got 1 turn left, basically, or Zach does.
it's kind of crazy. I mean, Zach got his soft lock out, gave Julian essentially a 1-turn window, and he took it. He took it, and it's actually put Zach into a very, very tough situation. He almost has to. Yeah, he has to actually activate the Codex Shredder himself because. And he's conceded because he can't actually stop that Walking Ballista, and he knows also there's an Ulamog on top of his deck. So,
Yep.
Did that go the way that we expected? Do we think that Tron, in the main deck, is advantage against Lantern, or do you think it's the other way around?
I think that there are a number of key cards that Julian John had that are, pretty great in this matchup. I think Walking Ballista in particular is a really nice way to pressure the opponent. I think that, it's important for Zach to draw multiple copies of cards like Codex Shredder, Pyxis of Pandemonium, or Ghoul Caller Spell. He only had 1. Because he only had 1, he was kind of forced to use his, Abrupt Decays and his Thoughtseize and Inquisitions very, very aggressively. And I think that, those are the strongest cards against Lantern control out of the Tron decks. So.
Okay. We had a live looking into a sideboarding situation. So Proto Champion Steve Rubin playing a red-green Tron. We saw him sideboarding, and he was... Okay.
Yeah.
So we actually heard a bit earlier from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Zach Elsik actually said that Mono Green Tron was his worst matchup. So
Tron is so many people's worst matchup. It's so funny. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. I mean, obviously Tron can get suppressed by some pretty good sideboard cards. Blood Moon's obviously pretty good. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of lands such as Ghost Quarter and its like that are pretty good. I guess people weren't packing that many for this weekend because some of the Tron has risen to the top.
It's actually interesting because I feel like those cards like Spreading Seas, Blood Moon, Field of Ruin, those cards have become really popular as of late. So it seems funny for Tron to kind of, come out. Maybe the presumption was this weekend people were thinking to themselves, oh, people are playing so many Spreading Seas and Blood Moons lately that, we don't even need to play the Spreading Seas and Blood Moons because nobody's going to be crazy enough to... It's that one step ahead.
So I'm sure there's a lot of eyes actually watching this event this weekend because Modern is going to be very, very prominent next year, and actually the next Pro Tour is Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan is actually going to be in the Modern format, and we've taken a few years off playing Modern at the Pro Tour level, but now it's back.
Yeah, Modern's great, especially from a viewing perspective. I mean, there are so many different decks. The way those decks play out can be very interesting. The complexity of the lines available to the players is just, seemingly endless. It's just a wonderful format.
Okay, so we actually have the sideboards for Zach and Julian. Having a look at the sideboards, who do you think actually, comes out on top after these decks have changed?
I think Julian definitely comes out on top. I think, one of the things that makes Tron so good against the Lantern deck here is that Julian has Chromatic Star, Chromatic Sphere, Ancient Stirrings, Expedition Map, Sylvan Scrying. He has all these ways to shuffle his deck. He has all of these ways to control what he's drawing. He has ways to put cards in his hand that are not necessarily on the top of his library. And as a result, the whole plan of the Lantern deck is kind of thrown askew.
Yeah, and I guess if he ever hits Tron, then kind of all gloves are off at that point.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have to be attacking his opponent to win because he has, different Planeswalkers. He has Walking Ballista. Even, cards like Ulamog are just nightmares for Zach because, when John just is able to get one into his hand, he can just cast it and, blow up the two most important permanents of Zach's Voltron. So, post-board, Julian John gets to add 3 Nature's Claim to his deck to make what seems like a decent matchup already even better. Zach Elsik, on the other hand, when we take a look at what he's trying to do in a matchup like this, it doesn't really look like there's that much. He's got an extra Pithing Needle, which I'm certain he's going to want. He may want to just bring in Tezzerets and try to get aggressive. I've seen some versions of Zach's deck that actually play Hazoret this weekend. If I had Hazoret in my board, I might be bringing it in just to, get him.
Okay, we're going to have a quick look into the Steve Rubin, Keenan, Davidson match. Steve Rubin on Red Green Tron, Keenan on Jeskai Control. So, Jeskai Control, there was one undefeated player playing Jeskai Control. We also have Keenan here playing at 8-1. Why would you make a choice like playing Jeskai Control in the current Modern format?
So Humans has been pretty popular as of late. There are always, tons of different tribal decks out in the running. Decks that, play creatures that don't necessarily go as wide as you might expect. And the Jeskai Control deck is so good at punishing those decks. It plays a ton of spot removal. It plays, 4 Path, 4 Bolt, some number of Lightning Helix. Post-board it can add even more. And it has Snapcaster Mage and other, ways to control its draw steps to take advantage of that. And that makes the deck pretty strong. The other thing is, against the decks that aren't these small creature-based decks like Tron, Jeskai Control is a very good draw-go Cryptic Command style deck. And a lot of those removal spells that it plays in the first game, those cards can also be sent at the opponent's face and can make it have a surprisingly fast clock. It can often kill you out of nowhere, especially as a control deck. You don't even really see that coming.
Yeah, it's almost not a control deck. It's more like a tempo deck because it has cards like Spellqueller, like Vidalia Click, Snapcaster Mage to some extent, and quite a lot of burn. Keenan has 4 Bolt and 4 Lightning Helix.
He's playing the full 4 Helix. Wow. Yeah. So usually there's 1 or 2 Electrolyze also. Looks like he has 1, yeah.
And not that many counterspells. He has 3 Cryptics, 3 Logic Knots, in addition to the Spellquellers. So in some ways he's just trying to, tempo his way through the game. So Steve actually going straight up to... Okay. Steve just went straight up to try and play World Queller, but Keenan had the Ceremonious Rejection, but we're actually ready on the main match, so we're going to go back to there.
That's so brutal when you have the counter spell for their payoff, and then they still get to blow up your land.
Okay,
Fair.
Zach opening with a Malx Opal and a Inquisition. So, and a Glimmer Void. So the only thing holding that Glimmer Void together is that Mox Opal. So it's possible if Julian actually has a Nature's Claim or something like that. Oh, he does not.
Yeah, if Julian had drawn a Nature's Claim there, that would have been real rough for Zach.
Okay. Spire of Industry, Lantern of Insight. We can see the top of the card again. So Ancient Stirrings and Urza's Mine. How good is the Relic in this matchup? I mean, is there a really good reason to get rid of it, or is it...
So it's not about getting rid of graveyards. It's about the fact that you can pay 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card. So in conjunction with cards like Chromatic Sphere or Chromatic Star, what happens is when your opponent goes to make you mill off, the important card on the top of your library, you can respond by sacrificing it. And then if they respond by trying to make you mill it again, you can respond by sacrificing one of your different artifacts, and so on and so forth.
So we're seeing just a little bit of Julian kind of accidentally played his second as power plant. He clearly meant to play a different one. He has different Urza pieces in his hand, and he didn't let his hand leave the card. So he's just checking with the judge to see if is able to actually make the change, and he is.
Okay.
Like he basically caught himself in time. He put it down. He's still in his hand, and he's like, "Oh, hold on, I put the wrong one into."
Yeah, I think it's good to give people a little bit of
the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, the benefit of the doubt in those situations. Especially, you're in the feature match area. It's early in the morning. Well, not that any of that plays into the decision of whether or not it's okay, but...
So Zach gets another Ancient Stirrings, looks at top 5.
He didn't even give Zach any extra information because of the Inquisition. It is what it is.
I mean, Ancient Stirrings is a lot of the glue that holds this deck together. I mean, it's almost a super ponder in this deck where you can find almost any relevant card, and 5 deep is really, really deep.
Yeah, I believe that, besides discard spells or Whir of Invention, Ancient Stirrings is, just finding basically every single card in the deck, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, Whir of Invention is like one of the new cards that have come into this deck. I mean, it's not like the newest card. I mean, it came in Kaladesh block. How much does that change how you build this deck?
Well, I think it made this deck go from being pretty good to being tier 1. And it looks like Karn Liberated has something to say about this deck's tier 1-edness.
Yeah, so Julian John actually went straight up to Tron, which obviously gives him access to 7 mana. Zach does not have a defense against Karn in play right now, and he's actually gone upstairs with the loyalty. So Karn has 10 loyalty, basically forcing Zach to discard a card out of his hand.
It looks like Zach's hand is actually pretty good, but I don't know how much it matters. It's so weird. Like, he has a Maelstrom Pulse, so he can deal with this first Karn. And then I believe he has like a Whir of Invention and an Ensnaring Bridge.
So funnily enough, he actually lets him have the Maelstrom Pulse. So he obviously has a different answer to what's going on here.
I think he knows something I don't know. Oh, he's going to Whir for a Pithing Needle?
Yeah.
That seems better.
It's a little bit more mana efficient at what it does. And it deals with, instead of Maelstrom Pulse only dealing with one Karn Liberated, it will deal with future Karn Liberateds as well.
Yeah.
I think,
it's even more mana efficient.
Yeah.
It's just the better play.
Zach is obviously knows every in and out of this deck, and quickly realized that the Pulse was, while an answer, not the best answer. Also, Zach had a Ensnaring Bridge in his hand, which knocks out some amount of the offense of Julian's deck. Okay, gets another Ancient Stirrings. Okay. The one thing that Relic of Progenitors kind of, let's call it randomly hits, is Zach does have Academy Runes in his deck, so it does hurt that a little bit.
And the Academy Runes actually comes up a reasonable percentage of the time when you're playing Lantern Control. I mean, it's only a one-of. It's really hard to afford to play more than one in the deck, but still a very powerful card.
So Zach does not have his lockout, and now Julian's all the way up to 9 mana after... the playing of the second power plant. Okay.
Oh my goodness. It's
Yes.
an Oblivion Stone.
Oblivion Stone is definitely one of the huge enemies of Zach's deck because obviously he's very much a deck that sets up a lot of permanents, and it's so brutal in this situation because not only does it kill all the artifacts in play on Zach's side, it also will kill the Glimmer Void.
Yeah. So Zach's going to be down to just a Spire of Industry that creates colorless mana.
Wow, that's like a 4 for 2 or something like that. Something ridiculous.
It's pretty nice.
Now, Julian could pretty much have his way with Zach right now.
I think we might see, a World Breaker to put Zach on nothing, and then he can sacrifice the Sanctum of Ugin and go get, Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, or whatever.
Okay, a walking ballista for 10, and Zach knows it's just a matter of time before he dies, and so Zach Elsik unfortunately goes from 9-0 to 9-1, but Julian John still undefeated 10-0 with Mono Green Tron, moves on to 10-0.
It has been foretold.
And, okay, actually, it looks like we're going to go to Game 3 of Steve Rubin versus Keenan Davidson. So, while Keenan was actually... I think that was the game that we saw the World Breaker on.
Yeah, the turn 3 World Breaker, where Keenan was able to use Ceremonious Rejection, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, he wasn't able to come back.
Yeah. World Breaker, I think, is a card that swings this matchup pretty far into the Tron deck's favor. I think that Jeskai Control is already weak to Tron. It's not a good matchup. You don't want to be playing against it. But when they have World Breaker also, a World Breaker comes down really early. Like really, really early. It's a fast card. It's an aggro card. And the fact that you're able to destroy lands that early as opposed to something like Ulamog, which is something where you can control the game a little bit more before it gets to that point.
So most of the Tron decks obviously revolve around green for 2 reasons. 1, Ancient Stirrings, and 2, Sylvan Scrying. But
absolutely,
there are kind of 3 flavors that people, or actually almost 4 flavors of Tron that people consider. So they do the Mono Green Tron we saw Julian and John playing. Steve Rubin's playing a red-green one. Green-black is also one that we saw Sam Black play. Not Sam Black. Someone else played a green-black version. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Eldrazi Tron decks. Like, what makes you choose between all the different Tron decks? Well, what is the advantages for each one?
So it's interesting. If you're playing red, you get access to board sweeping effects post-board. I think that's the major selling point of playing red and Tron. If you're playing mono green, you're just going for pure consistency. If you're playing Eldrazi Tron, you get to play a more aggressive deck that's significantly more resistant to Tron hate. You get to play with cards like Waste. You get to play cards that cost 4 and 5 if they do attack your mana base. You're still casting Thought-Knot Seers. You're still casting Reality Smashers.
Yeah. And Eldrazi Temple itself too.
Absolutely. So you get this other soul land, and then you're doing powerful things even when your opponent is able to disrupt your mana base. The green-black version, you get discard spells. That's the major advantage to that one. The fact that you could take their piece of Tron hate with a card like Thoughtseize and then proceed to do the broken things that the Tron deck does.
So which one would you take this if you had to play a Tron deck this weekend? Which one do you think is the best position?
I would probably play a mono greenish Tron deck, something like what Corey Baumeister played yesterday if I was playing one of those decks. If I was playing it for positioning. If I was playing because which one I wanted to play, I would play Eldrazi Tron.
You like beating down?
Yeah, I like smashing reality.
Okay, this third game in Steve Rubin versus Keenan Davidson started with a Flutter Strand on Keenan's side, fetching a Steam Vents. And he takes 3 damage on turn 1, going straight to Serum Visioning.
I believe he just drew a Search for Azcanta.
Ooh. One of the cards in Ixalan that's made a little bit of a splash this weekend.
Yeah, we've seen it as a 1 or 2 of in a lot of different strategies this weekend. We've also seen it even in Legacy. People are playing it in blue-white decks in Legacy. It's a really powerful card. I think it does... it's a lot more than we originally expected. We were like, oh, this card's great for standard control decks, but then we didn't realize, oh, in Modern, this thing is a rampant growth that is also a win condition.
I mean, getting to 7 is just much, much easier, obviously, with cards like Thought Scour and things like that. So, and the rampant growth effect, as you said, no slouch. I mean, it happens really quickly. So you essentially get a powerful land and a mana advantage against your opponent. Steve opening with a Chromatic Star and a Power Plant, and then converting that green mana from the star into a Ancient Stirrings. And he has options that Khan Liberated, Relic of Progenitus, and drumroll. Let's see if I can see what the other one is. I think that might be a
I don't know.
Spatial Contortion? No, that doesn't seem right.
Oh, yeah.
Warping Whale?
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be a Spatial Contortion. Yeah. I think Spatial Contortion seems likely because of Spell Queller. That may have been his thought process there.
Yep. Okay. Steve with Urza's Tower. And likely one of the 1-mana cantrips. Either a Relic or a Chromatic Sphere. And it looks like he goes for the Sphere. Okay.
And that's good because it gives him access to green mana on the following turn without affecting his total mana count. If he decides he needs to use a card like Sylvan Scrying or Ancient Stirrings.
Okay, Keenan looks at the top of his deck with Search of Azcanta. Actually sees a Stony Silence. It's actually, really good against the Tron decks because it locks out a lot of the cantrip stones.
Yeah, it does. It does lock out a good amount of these cards like Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star. It's reasonable against things like Walking Ballista. It's good against Oblivion Stone. It's just quite good against the Tron deck. The problem is that it does not effectively deal with the Eldrazi.
Yeah. And also the mana. If he gets to actually get to Urzatron, I mean, there's so many things he can do with 7, 9, 12 mana.
Yeah, cards like Worldbreaker or Ulamog can just exile the Stony Silence for basically no cost, and then turn on all of those other cards, which, your goal when playing something like Stony Silence is to invalidate them for the remainder of the game.
So Steve actually gets the Tron almost naturally. I mean, he obviously had a little bit of help there. So he places Khan in play with 6 loyalty. Now is going to decide whether he pluses or minuses. What do you think he's going to be looking at here?
So it's interesting because if he minuses, he puts the card into bolt range, which he may not want to do. And I don't really think there's that much of a downside to just plussing here. You're not being pressured at all. Mm-hmm. So I think I would just go upstairs.
Yep. Yeah. So it's actually a +4 on Khan's side. Gets a Scalding Tarn. Keenan is actually bolting Steve in the face, not actually redirecting it to Karn. So
I like it. He has another bolt and a Snapcaster in his hand. He's not winning this game by attacking that Karn. That will not happen.
So Keenan, he's kind of like one of those cards that he has naturally helps his. Actually, never mind. I actually misread what he had in his hand here.
I think it's Snapcaster Bolt Opt.
So with Karn, do you think he just continues to go up? Gets to a place where he can, perhaps restart the game? No, he actually decides to go for the Stony Silence.
I like that Steve is willing to, like change gears depending on what situation he's in. And, last turn he, specifically used the Karn in such a way to protect it from bolt. And then Keenan decided, okay, well, now I need to start bolting face. So then Steve said, okay, well, now I can start taking down the Karn. And even if you have 2 more bolts or a bolt and a Snapcaster, it's still out of bolt range because it is 7 loyalty. So,
yeah. So, yes. Though, by casting it in step, which I think he's doing now, he's able to actually bolt from the graveyard, hit the Karn, attack with the Snapcaster next turn, and then actually bolt from hand to get rid of that Karn. So going down that turn was actually pretty useful. Actually, he did it in response to the Relic because he wanted to make sure that the Snapcaster was, still had relevant targets before the graveyards were removed.
And that seems like the best way to do it, to respond to that Relic. You don't want to be letting that resolve and then casting a Snapcaster on their end step, especially, when they have a powerful Planeswalker in play like this. Steve might have wanted to cast the Relic before activating his Karn to gain the maximum amount of information here.
So I think if his hand is actually a spatial contortion, as we suspected, he'll actually be able to save his Karn because he'll be able to use the +3/-3 effect on the spatial contortion on the Snapcaster, and the second bolt will mean that he will not be able to pressure the Karn completely. Oh, Thragtusk. So actually, instead of actually playing a spatial contortion, he's actually putting up a blocker.
Man, Thragtusk is pretty good against these types of decks.
Yeah, I mean it's a cheaper threat. It also buffers his life a little bit.
Yeah, so much value. You get 3/3 when it leaves. You get a bunch of life when it comes in.
So Keenan puts a Logic Knot into his graveyard from the search of Elsik. So that Relic from Steve the previous turn put him way back on the search for Azcanta countdown. I think Keenan casts up here, sees a Lightning Helix from his hand, decides to put it in his hand. So
interesting.
So Keenan kept all the burn spells, it looks like, or at least some amount, because he has bolts and still some amount of helixes in his deck. So it may be he thinks that the best way to actually get Steve's deck is to either just burn them out.
Yeah, and something I like about this plan from Keenan is that that Karn can just tick upstairs, and it becomes really hard for Keenan to sit on cards in his hand. So he's trying to play the game in such a way where he can empty his hand as quickly as possible, because otherwise he's just going to be discarding relevant spells to this Karn, and that's not how you're going to win these games. He needs to just start firing off. And the problem is that the fire off and be aggressive plan is very, 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 very difficult when your opponent had just played a Thragtusk, because they gained a bunch of life.
City. Grand Prix Oklahoma City. I'm Ben Seck. This is Jake Van Loonen. We're playing Modern, and we have the undefeated players on screen right now. Zach Elsik, the father of Lantern Control, playing against Julian John, playing Mono Green Tron.
Zach Elsik defending this venue right now. Won the last Grand Prix here. Playing the same deck.
Has he made many changes, kind of like in recent months or even the city? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grand Prix Oklahoma City. I'm Ben Seck. This is Jake Van Loonen. We're playing Modern, and we have the undefeated players on screen right now. Zach Elsik, the father of Lantern Control, playing against Julian John, playing Mono Green Tron.
Zach Elsik defending this venue right now. Won the last Grand Prix here. Playing the same deck.
Has he made many changes, kind of like in recent months or even since he started playing it?
There have been some innovations to the deck, and they've oscillated quite a bit to the extent where I'm not really sure where where it really was the last GP. The deck, though, the core of the deck is very much the same. Like it's very hard to change more than, it's very hard to change more than a couple main deck cards, and even changing sideboard slots can be really difficult with the deck. Although I have seen quite a few Hazarets this weekend in the sideboard. It seems like Zach's post sideboard plan sometimes involves Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas this weekend, and even Search for Azcanta.
Okay, so Zach opened with an Ancient Stirrings, finding a Pithing Needle, and he's just casting that right now. Julian John started off with an Urza's Tower. So we'll find out exactly. City. Grand Prix Oklahoma City. I'm Ben Sek. This is Jake Van Loonen. We're playing Modern, and we have the undefeated players on screen right now. Zach Elsik, the father of Lantern Control, playing against Julian John, playing Mono Green Tron.
Zach Elsik defending this venue right now. Won the last Grand Prix here. Playing the same deck.
Has he made many changes, kind of like in recent months or even city? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grand Prix Oklahoma City. I'm Ben Sek. This is Jake Van Loonen. We're playing Modern, and we have the undefeated players on screen right now. Zach Elsik, the father of